This is Stigma, where we talk with leaders from many industries about how mental health and addiction have impacted their lives. Many people suffer silently from mental illness, addiction, depression, anxiety, and trauma. They never seek help because of stigma. In this podcast, host Stephen Hayes and his guests share their stories of recovery in order to encourage others to do the same. Here's Stephen.
Welcome back to the Stigma Podcast. I am your host, Stephen Hayes, and today we're talking about men's health, men's mental health specifically. It's a topic that for those of you who don't know my personal story, I certainly have some experience with this topic. Our guest today is Johnny Chen. He's the founder of SAIL, which is a coaching community that empowers men to be more vulnerable, which I think is an incredible mission. The focus of their platform is to encourage men to get better at leadership, get better with relationships, get better at emotional intelligence. The way he describes it in the conversation is that the platform is really kind of the Peloton for the mind of men. And so I'm excited about this conversation. We're going to dig into men's mental health broadly. We're going to dig into what SAIL is doing to help men. And I can't wait to share it with you. So without any further ado, Johnny, thanks for coming on, man. Excited to have you.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen, for making this happen. I'm excited as well.
So I wanted to start with you kind of telling a little bit about who you are and how you found your way into the mental health space.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take this back a little bit because my story with mental health is quite personal. Growing up, I've always looked up to my older brother. He was always smarter, he was more athletic, and he was my role model in many ways. For many reasons, he took a different life. He dropped out of college to become an online poker player, then got into Bitcoin mining, day trading, sports betting, whatever he could do to not have a job and really work for himself. And I was inspired by that to really be an entrepreneur and think differently and be a contrarian. And then all of a sudden, everything changed in 2018. We learned that he developed a very severe case of schizophrenia. And as you know, it's one of the most serious mental illnesses. And if left untreated, it can turn someone's life completely upside down. And so the last 2 years have been nothing short of trauma, really, for me and especially my parents. And it's been a revolving door of hospitals and courtrooms and jail cells, domestic violence, physical violence against both my mom and dad. And it's been a challenge. It's been a big challenge for us. But as a way for me to cope, I started looking at men's mental health and really looking at why it's so much harder for someone like my brother and really millions of men across the country to seek help when they need to. And I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. In the case of my brother, he has clinical issues where it's hard for him to realize what type of illnesses he has and what's going on. But what I've also learned is for the majority of America, we've been conditioned to think that it's better to man up, that we're not man enough, that boys don't cry, all these toxic statements that have conditioned us to suppress our feelings and emotions. And I think that's had detrimental effects on society because men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide and 3 times more likely for alcohol and drug abuse. And 99% of school shooters are men. And all these signs pointing why I think this is one of the worsening crises affecting our country and world today. And so I was inspired by that to build something in mental health for men and just change the narrative around that. My personal background has been in startup world and tech for about 6 to 7 years. I led product and growth for a range of consumer startups, including healthcare companies like Hims and meditation apps like 10% Happier, Simple Habit, etc. And so for me, this was finally an opportunity where it was the intersection of something I'm personally passionate about and a dedication to the legacy that my brother left behind and an alignment with the type of company that I wanted to build. So inspired by all that, earlier this year in 2020, I decided to launch SAIL, which is a coaching community that empowers men to be more vulnerable. So we offer immersive programs with world-class coaches on topics like leadership, relationships, and emotional intelligence. And you can think of it as as Peloton for your mind, where we help you train your mental and emotional muscles with a focus on active learning, backed by the guidance of a coach and like-minded peers.
I love that description, Peloton for your mind. That's great.
Yeah, I think I draw a lot of inspiration from, there was a chart that you guys have put out where it was called Mind Tech Landscape. There was a spectrum from mental illness on the left-hand side of the scale, all the way to mental wellness and mental performance on the other end. And for me, this is really our thesis in the company, which is you don't need to have a mental illness to work on your mental health. And I'll say that again. You don't need to have a mental illness to work on your mental health. And I think especially for men, there's such a stigma that I don't need to go to therapy or I don't need to see a doctor because there's nothing wrong with me. I don't have anxiety, I don't have depression, I don't have bipolar disorder. And while that might be true for that person, that doesn't mean that there are opportunities to improve your mental health and mental performance. And that's, I think, where we come in with coaching, which is we help people that are not necessarily clinically diagnosed with anything still get better and perform better at various aspects of their life.
Yeah, I mean, if I go to my primary care physician and I have a checkup and the doctor tells me I'm in good health, I don't stop exercising. I don't start eating poorly. I continue to take care of my physical health, even though I don't have a diagnosis at the time. So why don't we treat mental health that way?
Yeah, exactly. Like comparison I make is to your physical fitness, right? None of us go to the gym for a few times and then we're done with it. It's not a one-time thing. With your physical muscles, you have to continue to train, continue to surprise your muscles, continue to add in variations to keep you improving and optimizing there. And the reality is like your mind needs the same thing as well. And I think that's where we're positioning ourselves as like training for your mental fitness, because it's a mental muscle that you have to continue working on over time so that you can better the relationships with those around you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like I go to the gym and I work out and I come home and I didn't lose any fat. I don't quit going to the gym. I go back. I do more. I go back every day.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I love it. One of the things you said in the first few minutes there, you said that there's this theme in society to man up or boys don't cry. There's this toughness around what being a man is. And I want to dig into that a little bit. Where does that come from? Has it always been that way? I mean, have men for thousands of years been that way, or is that kind of a new thing?
Yeah, I think it's been there for centuries. And I think it comes from, if we look at our history, men were always the figure in the family that were the breadwinners, the ones that were hunters and gatherers, and the ones that were the strong ones bringing in the food and support for the family. And so it conditioned, I think, humans to assume that men had to be strong and had to be put together, which then correlates and translates to if they show emotion, that means they're weak. If they cry or if they say they're not okay, then that means they're weak and they're no longer deemed a man. And I think that whole philosophy is so upside down. And we're finally starting to see that change. But the reality is we're still a long way away from where we want to be. And the things that are showing that that's starting to change is you have traditionally male figures and celebrities starting to open up and talk about their challenges with mental health. The example I give is Kevin Love, who's a famous NBA player on the Cavaliers. He opened up a few years ago about the panic attacks and anxiety he had on court and how it led him down to therapy. And now he's an activist for mental health. But if you're an 18-year-old teenage boy somewhere in the middle of America, and you finally hear Kevin Love, someone you've looked up to all your life, open up about mental health, that's a revolutionary moment where you're like, whoa, maybe it's okay for me to talk about mental health. Maybe it's okay to work on my mind. Maybe it's okay to see a therapist. And so I think we're starting to see that change, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of people that are being outspoken about this now, and that's reducing stigma. That reduction in stigma is creating demand for services or for places for people to go to get the help that they now know that they need or that they now are willing to ask for. And I think that's what creates the market opportunity for people like you. Am I understanding that right?
Yep, I think that's spot on. I think to the stigma, I live in San Francisco, and you would assume that folks here are a lot more liberal and forward thinking. And I think generally they are, but there's still such a stigma with a lot of my male friends here around therapy. Even though we have a lot of females in our lives that are openly talking about going to therapy, for men, it's still very far behind. And I think it takes investors like yourself, it takes companies like ours, and it takes a lot of other inspirations out there to start to move that conversation forward and change that narrative.
So I think there's a UI, UX, or a customer acquisition issue around mental health broadly. I agree with you. I think everybody needs to be doing something about their mental health. I think it's kind of like jogging or fitness was 30 years ago. It's sort of starting to become a thing, and eventually everyone will have a gym membership or two or three, or a Peloton and a gym membership and a, 4 pairs of running shoes. That will happen in the mental health space. And so the people that are building the infrastructure to facilitate that today are going to be well positioned from a business point of view. But the question that comes up for me is, how do you go get the man who doesn't think he needs help? He's resistant to it. Are you trying to convince him to come to your platform? And if so, how do you do that? And I know that's the $1 million question. I have to ask it.
Absolutely. That's the tough sell. I think our earliest adopters, I think our beachhead market, our first target customers are actually not those folks. Our target customers are men, generally between the ages of 25 and 54, that are hyper focused on improving their lives already. So I call them self-optimizers in every aspect of their lives. They're likely to already do meditation and yoga. They might be really into performance optimizations on their health and fitness. They might run marathons or do CrossFit, etc. But those are the folks that are already actively thinking about, like, how else can I perform better? And I think that's where we come in with coaching, which is we help you perform better at X, Y, and Z versus via these programs and coaches. In terms of the folks that are a little bit earlier in that process, I think it's a challenge. Like you said, that's the $1 million question. I think it's a challenge because how do you sell something to someone that doesn't know that they need it or want it? And I deal with this every day. My brother is refusing treatment. And if you ask any psychologist or therapist for schizophrenia, you need to take medication on a daily basis to slowly get better. He doesn't think he has an issue. And so he refuses treatment. And in society, we can't force him to take medication if he doesn't want to. And so it's a daily battle for me and my mom to figure out, like, how else do we position our conversations, or how else do we ask him the right questions so that he can eventually open up about, like, why he might need medication or why it might be good for him. And it is a very, very tough battle.
Yeah, I think there's this condition in the human brain where when we're in our addiction or when we're in a mental illness and we're unmedicated and untreated, I can't explain it from a science perspective. I can just explain it from a personal experience perspective, having lived with addiction and bipolar disorder. There's something going on in the brain when you're not well that prevents you from wanting wellness. And I can't explain it, man. I can't put a finger on it. But that's why I asked the question, because I think there's a lot of people out there that need help. They actually don't want help. But if you got it to them, they would keep coming back.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of chemical imbalances in your brains and neurotransmitters, but also societal and behavioral. And to our earlier conversation, I do think there's some aspect of this where we are conditioned to think that we can't, as men, that we can do it all ourselves. And I think that's the part of the battle that our company is about, is to change that narrative and slowly open people up to say, hey, I'm good, I'm fine, but I can perform better at X, Y, and Z.
So tell me a little bit about the customer experience. So if I'm one of these guys that's regularly self-optimizing and I'm taking care of my physical fitness, maybe I'm already meditating, I'm your ideal customer or target population. I learn of Sail. What's my first experience? How do I connect with you? And then kind of walk me through the customer experience in the early days of working with Sail as a user.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 2 customer experiences I'll walk you through. The first is the crux of our company, which is our coaching programs. So we currently offer several 4-week coaching programs, which are 4 sessions of 90 minutes each. Groups meet weekly with 1 expert coach and a group of 10 like-minded guys to work through specific topics like leadership, relationships, emotional intelligence, etc. And what happens in these sessions is a mix of coach-led content sharing, a little bit of educational piece there, where coaches are teaching things like gentle inquiry. How do you ask better questions to dig deeper with your friends and family? Or how do you mirror someone so that you show them you're listening and that you're affirming what they're saying? And then very quickly, we transition into how do you practice those skill sets in breakout rooms on Zoom with the other attendees. And then just have a safe space and an open forum where guys can talk through those specific challenges in their lives. And what we're finding is that men are actually more likely to open up when they hear another guy talk first. And I think there's something to that group model mentality where you're sharing in not only the cost, but also the experience with other like-minded guys. And there's so much value in just sitting and hearing someone else's story that you can resonate with. And so our programs are very much focused on that active learning shared model experience, just like Peloton, where you're at home by yourself, but you're tuning in real time with all these other people around the world sharing in this experience with you. And then the second part is we're also starting to build up our SAIL community, which is a free community where like-minded guys, anyone can come through and talk through specific challenges or questions around their career, health and fitness, relationships, life productivity hacks, focus, reading, etc. And just start to build a community where guys can talk through anything that's on their mind. We surveyed a bunch of our customers recently and asked, what is it about a SAIL that keeps you here? What attracts you about SAIL? And a lot of the folks have said it's the community. I want to meet other like-minded guys that are going through something similar or are trying to get better at something, and I want to hear their experience. And so for us, community is a huge, huge part of what we're building and growing at this time.
And I would say I joined the Slack channel that you've got, and I love it. I mean, there's a lot of really genuine, vulnerable conversation going on in there amongst men that I don't find in many other places, maybe other than my AA room or one of my other recovery programs. So I've really enjoyed the community so far. How do you see the community evolving over time? What's SAIL going to look like in a few years? Where are you going with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're currently at about 100 folks in our community. That's growing. That is our number one focus, to get to 500, then 1,000, then 5,000, etc. And where I see the value add for community members is over time, we're going to start to add in different products and different experiences for our users. So the pinpoint of our company is our 4-week coaching programs. We're also going to start adding in one-time coaching sessions with outside coaches that we might want to work with down the line. We're surveying our customers to figure out what is the number one topic they would like to see SAIL host. And so we would create a program at that intersection between what our customers want and what our coaches are uniquely good at. And then we'll also add in weekly meditation sessions, weekly breath work, weekly social fitness classes, weekly emotional check-ins. And then one time, let's call it AMAs, Ask Me Anythings, with outside thought leaders that we think will resonate well with our performance-minded men. And our community, I think, is something that we want to keep free and open to the public over time, because we're not trying to monetize necessarily off of our community. That's something that we think is just a value add that we can put out to the world. And then over time, we will convert some of those into our paying programs.
And what are some of those paying programs? Are they already up and running now, or are they coming? What's sort of the status there?
Yep. We got 5 launching in the first week of September. The 5 are, one is on relationship skills for men in committed romantic partnerships that want to get better at intimacy and relations with their partners. We have one on risk-taking and vulnerability, which is really focused on how do you take a 10% more risk in your daily conversations, whether that's with your partner, with your co-founder, or even with a Starbucks barista. We have one called Finding the One, which is focused on helping single men find a committed romantic partnership. And this one I'll talk about a little bit more. It's not a dating coach. It's very much focused on our core value of vulnerability and authenticity. So this program is about, how do you show up more vulnerably when you're on a date? How do you show up more authentically in your conversations leading up to that date? And how do you do the work on yourself so that you know what you want and you know what your expectations are so that you can better show up in the world with those? So it really is the self-work more than anything else here. The 4th program is called Self-Worth for Gay Men, which is focused on the stories that we tell ourselves as gay men growing up in a heterosexual world and how that's affected identity, values, belonging, needs, etc. And then the last one, which is one that we've already run 2 cohorts with, is called Relational Intelligence. This one's taught by a former facilitator of Stanford's famous touchy-feely class, which was the number one course at the Stanford Graduate School of Business for about 50 years. And this coach, Norman, is incredible because he's built a very topical and very practical program on how do you relate better with others? How do you ask better questions? How do you become a better listener? How do you mirror folks? And then how do you take those skills into your daily lives as well? So all 5 are currently open for enrollment, and we're trying to get more customers in the programs.
How often do the courses cycle? I mean, is there going to be a new one on that same topic next month? Or if I don't sign up now, am I going to miss this topic until sometime in the future? How do you think about scheduling the topics, and how often do they repeat?
Yeah, they're currently just once a month because I'm facilitating all of them, and there's only so many hours I can jump into each of these programs. I think at scale, we'll eventually scale each of these programs to have multiple time slots. Ones that might work better for Pacific time, one's better for East Coast, one for Europe and Asia as well. So over time, we'll have more concurrent cohorts. Currently, they're just once per month. If for some reason you can't make this one, you can always join our community or sign up for our email list, and you'll be the first to be notified when we launch the next one.
That's awesome. And do you have enough data to tell me which ones are most popular?
Yeah, I mean, 2 of them are the existing programs we did this past month. 3 of them are new. So it's hard to answer that question, but I'd say the 2 that we've run are risk-taking and vulnerability and relational intelligence. Very different styles because a lot of these are dependent on the coaching styles and the coaches, but both have been incredibly popular, and we have members from those programs signing up again for a second program.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. What can folks do to help you and help your mission? I mean, obviously, you're probably out raising money. You probably could use some more coaches on the platform. I don't know. You could probably use some users to come along and try the product and give you feedback. If someone's listening to this program and they want to get involved and help you because they believe in your mission, what's the best way someone can help right now?
Yeah, I love that. Our mission is to empower men to show up in the world with more authenticity and vulnerability. So if you identify as male and that resonates with you, come to our website, joinsale.co, and sign up for a program. If that's too big of a commitment right now, join our community. Our community is free. We're going to add more value over time, and you're going to meet other folks in our community already, including Steven, engaging in these topics. If you identify as a female, please just help spread the word. Interestingly enough, one of our biggest sources for referrals are women sending their boyfriends to our programs because they're telling us that my boyfriend needs this, or I wish my boyfriend was more vulnerable so we can have talks about his emotions and our emotions. So the women in our lives and in our community are some of our biggest advocates. If you identify as one of them, please help spread the word as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can honestly vouch for the community. It's one of the only Slack channels I have notifications on. I really like it, man. It's great.
Thank you.
What am I missing? What should I be asking about? I always sort of wrap up with that because I'm the least qualified person in this conversation to be talking about this topic probably. So what would you like to highlight about SAIL?
Yeah, I think the big thing that comes to mind is where we see the future is similar to what you mentioned earlier around in 5 to 10 years from now, we believe in a world where everyone is spending equal amounts of time and money on their mental health as they are on their physical health. And we believe that one of the ways to get there is through coaching and through group experiences and through a community. First, starting with men, and we could see ourselves eventually expanding into women-only groups and then co-ed groups as well. But it's still a question to be seen. Like, are we a little bit too early to the market? Is there still such stigma that it's hard to convince men to sign up for a program and pay for a program? And so I think something I think about is like, how do we best position this? How do we use the right marketing and positioning and branding? Which is why, as you see on our website, it's called Training for Your Mental Fitness. Nowhere on our website do we use the words mental illness or mental health, which underlying is a lot of similar themes, but I think the positioning and the branding of it is so key. You have to speak to where men are today, not where we want them to be. And so a lot of that is what we focus on currently is like, how do we best message and present this to our target audience?
Yeah, I think it's great, man. I love what you're doing. I think there's going to be a revolution, if you can call it that, in the way men see themselves and the way that men go about becoming more vulnerable and getting connected to other men and to other people more broadly. And I really commend what you're doing, man. I'm excited about it. And I have one more question. Why the name Sail? Where'd you come up with that?
Yeah, that was from my former co-founder. And the concept there is in life, you're always heading to a specific direction and you might not always know where you're going. But as long as you trust your sailmates and as long as you trust your sail captain, eventually you're going to get through the rough waters ahead and stay on course to your final destination. And I just love that because it's very much about a journey and it's very much about like there are going to be rough waters ahead. But as long as you trust the people that are around you, you're never sailing alone, right? As long as you trust your support network, you eventually stay on course and really get to your goals in life and actually accomplish them.
Oh, that's great, man. That's probably a good place for us to wrap it up, man. I really appreciate you, like I said, building this. I appreciate you taking time to come on and share with our audience what you're up to. And for anyone listening, I hope folks will go. If you identify as male, I hope you'll go check out what Johnny's doing. If you identify as female, if there's a male in your life that's a friend or a relative or a neighbor who you think could benefit, I'd recommend you suggest them checking out the platform as well. So, Johnny, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate having you come and do this with us.
Thank you, Stephen. This was fun. I really appreciate it.
I want to say another special thank you, Johnny, for coming on, man. I appreciate you making time. I think that there are a lot of men out there that could use what you're doing. I hope they'll check it out. Check out the community on Slack. It's free. I hope that folks will come check out the courses. I think they're going to be great. I'm going to sign up for one myself. To our listeners, thank you for being here. We couldn't do this without you. We'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us on Twitter at StigmaCast. You can find us on Instagram at Stigma Podcast. You can email us, info@stigmapodcast.com. We want to know what you think about our content. We want to know what you want to hear more of, what you want to hear less of, what you agree with, what you disagree with. To the founders out there in the mental health space, we have a Slack community just for you. It's called the Mental Health Startup Slack Community. And you can find the link to that in our show notes. We'd love to have you join us. Love to have you engage with other entrepreneurs, investors, advisors, supporters, promoters of the mental health startup ecosystem. And that's really it for today. Thank you guys for being here. We'd love it if you'd like or share or comment or tweet or tell your friends about our content. And if you love our content and want to support us, we have a Patreon page linked in the show notes as well. And that's it. Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay safe and be well.